Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I wish I could wish you actually a good morning, but it is chaotic to say the least. So, my job will be to dissect everything, to explain what is worth paying attention to, what is not worth paying attention to, what is actually new, and what is just repeated nonsense. All right. Good morning. My name is Olga, known as OnestPress across the socials. Welcome back. We're going to discuss national news and also global politics. And I will have a bit of a preview as to what to expect this week and what will be happening today, tomorrow, and as well as Friday, which is this meeting, highly anticipated meeting between Trump and Putin, and what to expect and what may result out of it. But first, let's say hi. Hey, Steven, welcome. Good morning. Table Fox, good morning. Good morning, Michael. Happy Monday. Good morning, Tidy Whitey. Steven says, I just saw August tweet. Okay, yes. Okay. Hi, Lita. Lita has thoughts. I wonder what type of thoughts. Good morning. Hi, Jared. Good morning. Okay, sorry for a bit of a delay because we had Trump speaking. He was late per usual, about 40 minutes in. And, he delivered some type of news, and we're going to talk about it. So, first things first, we just got breaking news that the judge will not unseal grand jury transcripts in Maxwell case. And so the longtime companion, she's not just a companion of Epstein. If you read any official court documents, she has done, she did abuse young girls, maybe not as much, but she did abuse them alongside Epstein. So I would not call her a conspirator or some type of companion. She was as much involved as he was. So the ruling comes as Trump has tried to subdue criticism and conspiracy theories from his supporters about Epstein in his circle. And so this is the breaking news delivered by New York Times. Did we expect the documents to be unsealed? No, not really. This is not in the interest of the GOP. It's not in interest of anybody in Trump's team. And as we saw it today, if you have seen this press conference in Washington, D.C., where Trump was standing alongside Hegseth and Bondi, and all of them are pretty much playing for the same team. They're saying the same literally words and statements, and they're very much aligned. Sorry for the noises. This is New York. If it's too loud, let me know. I will close all the windows and suffocate myself. Okay. So actually, I would love to provide clear readouts as to what did happen today. So first, 10 a.m. was supposed to be the press conference that Trump did announce on his Truth Social platform yesterday. It was all about DC, but there we also heard statements about other cities and also his upcoming meeting with Putin. And so in a controversial statement, Trump labeled Washington, DC as the worst place on earth, comparing it to cities like Bogota and Mexico City. He claimed the city has been overtaken by drug maniacs and homeless people, citing supposed rise in crime. According to Trump, DC has become so dangerous that it doubled up on Baghdad in crime. Citing unverified charts he claims no one has ever seen before. Now, here I have to give him some right. Nobody has ever seen this before because, in fact, and this is posted by the DOJ, and perhaps they forgot to take it offline. This was posted as recent as on January 5th, that DC is actually experiencing a 30-year low when it comes to crime rates. and the crime declined by 26%. And DC is not even leading in crime, among major cities in United States, and obviously not in the world. So it's also very interesting that aside of Baghdad, he cited as those crime infested cities all Latin American cities and Hispanic, right? So this just feeds the narrative that Hispanic people are those murderers and drug dealers and whatnot who are pouring into the country. And now he closed the border. There's zero crossings. Obviously, there's more military than anybody else, right? And so he claims to achieve the same story with DC. Now, what is unclear to me is what is the purpose, right? So nobody would be able to travel inside the city, and that will certainly include a bunch of reporters who live outside the Washington, D.C. area. A lot of reporters live in Baltimore. They live in sort of outskirts of Washington, D.C. just because it's cheaper, and they drive in car to get there. So this will restrict reporting. This will restrict also people who are just working in D.C. and living outside, right? So what is the purpose here? But let's read further. Standing with Secretary of Defense Hegseth and Attorney General Bondi, Trump argued that the situation in D.C. had worsened so much that they'll get it passed with no Democratic votes once Hegseth and Bondi draw up something. And this something that the Secretary of Defense and the DOJ leader supposed to draw up is something to what Trump calls as to, or labels as to, diminishing or getting rid of sanctuary cities who have sort of the right to protect migrants and to protect immigrants. And so in his scenario, he wants to get rid of this, and he wants to target sanctuary cities as the first, spots to federally take over, essentially, right? Despite data showing DC's crime rate is at its lowest in 30 years, Trump insists the city faces a public safety crisis. In response, he signed 2 executive orders, and this is what matters. And I have the executive orders here with me. So the first one is declaring a crime emergency in District of Columbia, followed by, so this is a proclamation, a memorandum for the Secretary of Defense restoring law and order in District of Columbia. And so what does this mean? The first executive order grants the president broader powers over the DC Police Department in the event of this so-called heightened national security threats or public safety concerns. Essentially, Trump declared DC public safety concern emergency. He proclaimed it with this order, and hence he gave himself the power to over the police force of Washington, D.C. and District of Columbia. The second, this proclamation directs the Secretary of Defense to deploy the National Guard and work with governors to mobilize additional units to assist in D.C. and other cities facing similar issues. And so this is just the beginning. And let's actually zoom out for a bit. How did it all begin? Before Trump was inaugurated, he started this narrative that Canada is the 51st state, that Mexico is sending us the drug cartel leaders and all that type of stuff, right? Essentially aiming to declare national emergency, right? Which would grant him the ability to sort of control the entire United States and bypass regional and state leadership, right? Folks fought in courts. Also, Canada has fought. Mexico has fought. Canada said, look, we're going to install the fentanyl czar, and you have only 1% of fentanyl is pouring across the border. So it does not represent any national emergency. Trump, to this day, is using national emergency as the reason to pass those tariffs on Canadian imports. This has been challenged, well, on television a little bit, in newspapers a bit more, but not really much in court, aside from Canada actually filing a case with World Trade Organization saying that this goes against the free trade agreement, and so on and so forth. So those tariffs are not justified. But within the country, we have to understand that those tariffs are not legal. The tariffs have to be handled by the Congress. They have to be voted upon, and so on and so forth. So he's using national emergency as the reason for those tariffs, which is bogus, right? He claims that we do have inconsistency in trade, that we have imbalance, right? That we're buying more than we're selling. But whose fault is that? That we stopped producing and we essentially just allocated our production facilities into China, right? We exported, we stopped producing, and we sponsored and did everything to give finances to China to build up those factories so we can buy everything much cheaper. Also, what is never mentioned is that we're selling services, software and services alike, way more than we purchase. So if we were to count in the services that we sell, the imbalance would be quite balanced. But this is not in the interest of this approach, right? So first, national emergency with fentanyl and the borders failed to be the reason to declare national emergency, right? To mobilize National Guard, to militarize the cities and patrol the literally streets, especially in major cities like New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and San Francisco and so on and so forth. Again, noises are greetings from New York. My apologies. Now, what did he try next? He tried to portray, well, sort of insinuate and portray that those protests in Los Angeles would become a reason to mobilize National Guard. He sent 2,000 troops into Los Angeles. The entire area is about 2 to 4 blocks where people are standing. He claimed to protect federal property, which is literally one building. Now he has about 400 national troops there, or National Guard troops there. So it does not really qualify as the reason to take control over the country, claiming that we're experiencing this national emergency, that people are fighting on the streets and they're, trying to take over the government and whatnot. So this failed. So the third approach here is to take city by city, claiming that a city is drowning in crime, that it is controlled by those drug dealers and homeless people. So which is sort of like decide who is who, because those two do not really align. Yes, we do have homeless issue. We have people who don't have even ability to seek home, or those who are facing such tragic mental health issues that they're not even responding to help that is offered to them. So for that reason, yes, we need to address this urgent issue, but not by, putting those folks into jails. This was the previous executive orders that Trump passed and signed into law about a few weeks ago, right? Opening these mental institutions, essentially sending folks into prisons that are now becoming businesses. Right? So this will help his friends who donated to his campaign, and then they will be making money off of prisons that will be imprisoning homeless people who didn't do anything wrong, just because, they were homeless. That qualifies them to be criminals. And so at this point, we have to stick to data. When it comes to DC, it's a 30-year low when it comes to crime rates. The crime rates have went down by 26%. It is not the leading city in crime, but it is a beginning. It is this, first stone into the fundamental federal takeover, if you will, because it failed to use borders as the reason. It failed to use fentanyl as the reason. It failed to use Los Angeles protests as the reason, because Newsom, the governor of California, Newsom has exposed the truth. Also, the mayor Basson and everybody pretty much played along or played together to expose the lie, the obvious lie. So now it comes to Washington, D.C. Will their mayor step up and speak out and show the data and show the realistic picture of what it looks like in Washington, D.C., or will they just follow the orders, the very much illegal orders, because this federal takeover of police force and mobilizing National Guard, and now saying, Trump was asked about other cities to follow. He said, well, of course, New York will follow next. New York is horrible. So much crime and everything. We're going to do it quickly. We're going to clean up the streets. Then Hagseth came out and said that, yes, we already have begun our work over the weekend to mobilize National Guard, and they will be patrolling the streets in DC in the coming weeks. And this will follow to New York very soon, because we'll practice it on Washington, DC. We'll figure out what works fast, and then they're going to go further. Then Trump also said that FBI agents will be also patrolling the streets, and there will be other units patrolling the streets, and you will be feeling so safe in Washington, D.C. As safe as living under what, Nazi regime? As safe as, and Frank, or like, what is your idea of safe, right? In prison, yeah, you are safe because you can't leave anywhere. So here, we will be jailed and still paying for our food. And that's sort of the idea of safety. So he also said, oh, I'm so embarrassed to talk about it because I will be facing Putin, the leader of Russia, on Friday instead of preparing for my meeting. What shaving? I have to be here and I have to declare this emergency. And so factually, he signed those one executive order, one proclamation, and he declared Pam Bondi, the head of DOJ, Department of Justice, as the leader of this entire takeover, right? So she's in charge of this operation to clean up the streets and make DC safe, and then they're going to make DC beautiful. I guess they're going to put statues of Trump and folks alike. So essentially, Trump declared public safety emergency in DC, admitting he felt embarrassed, blah, blah, blah. Then he promised major surge in law enforcement, including more police, military personnel, and FBI agents. Then Hagseth came to the microphone and said that they will be also protecting ICE agents to allow them to do their job without any, threats to them. Meanwhile, ICE agents are masked. We don't know who these people are. We don't know, are they even ICE agents or not? And they're stealing people off the streets. And people who are actually either naturalized citizens or green card holders or actually even US-born citizens. A bunch of them are ending up in the third countries that they have no relations to, or in those camps that are very similar to the concentration camps, if you don't want to label them as such. So Hagseth confirmed National Guard and other units would begin operations soon, focusing on protecting ICE agents. As I said, Bondi, which is now overseeing much of the operation, declared DC crime stops today. Trump also criticized urban crime more broadly, claiming New York is horrible too, but vowed to focus first on cleaning up DC before addressing other cities he believes are similarly troubled. Critics, however, argue that Trump's portrayal of DC is misleading. Well, this is really, to say the least. It's made up data to use it for some type of federal takeover of certainly police, but also militarizing or using our military against people that military certainly, claims to protect. So let me know what you guys think, and I will read your comments now. Morning, Sea Twist Productions. Good morning. Good morning. Courtney Crush, good morning. The U.S. government knows Canada was never a threat. Yeah, absolutely, it wasn't. Canada wasn't even listed in U.S. own threat assessment report. Exactly, but you're referring to the actual data, right? And I'm not saying that the Biden administration was the best and all that, but they had data that I could use to report factual information, right? Report on factual information. Now everything is pretty much propaganda. Jared says, as an outside observer, I never thought I'd see day America would abandon freedom. Once it's gone, it will be very difficult to get back. And thank you, Jared. You really nailed it here, because trust is broken. This is a fact. Trust is broken because of the tariffs, because of this unprovoked tariff war, because we're abandoning our obligations that we gave to our allies. We are threatening our allies. We are threatening to take over Greenland that has absolutely no relation to United States, but has all the relation to European Union that apparently is our ally. We are abandoning Ukraine, even though in 1994 we signed to protect Ukraine for their willingness to give up the nukes. Third world power, nuclear weapons wise at that point. So we are just, you know, misbehaving to say the least, but we are breaking on every single promise we made. We're breaking the promises. We are breaking our reputation altogether. And when trust is broken, it will be very difficult to restore, even when Trump is gone, because, at that point, our allies will know that, look, the system is so weak and is so inefficient that even though the next guy or girl comes in and restores our agreements, well, there can be another one then, because we have democracy, if we end up having elections and democracy. Yes? So the other one can come in and again break down the promises and restore the Trump regime. So for that reason, we will not be trusted. The agreements will not be surpassing any democratic leader's term, because it will be very difficult to trust that this will be maintained once a new person is in power. Steven says, sad, Memphis and Birmingham, Alabama have higher violent crime rates than DC. Absolutely, it is a scam. It is a scam. Corny Crush says he's a lunatic. Yeah, but he also has a very clear agenda to control the entire United States. He has a very clear approach. They're trying one way, other way, third way. So as I explained, this is his third method, if you will, to control the United States. Tidy Whitey says New York, and he mentioned Chicago. Yes, Kristi Noem said the model of what they did in LA would be rolled out to other cities across America same day. Senator Padilla was cuffed. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Well, there was also one federal employee who was fired, and she posted just one TikTok video. She said, I'm not a journalist, I'm not an influencer, I'm just going to put this one video out and I'm gone. And in that video, she stated that what you have to account for is that Trump pretty much promised to give up DC to Peter Thiel and to create this technocracy. So essentially, he would then govern upon the police force and National Guard, and then say, well, it would be more efficient if we use AI or systems alike and technology altogether to sort of control the big cities. And that would lead for those, tech billionaires to have control over certain cities. This is what she mentioned. It could be conspiracy theory. It could be made up. It could be real. So I'm just, saying what I saw. I'm not putting it into my newsletter, but it's certainly interesting to mention. Michael, hey, Michael. Michael says, in my 70 years, I never thought I'd pull for other countries to do better than the U.S. Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And somehow, when countries are issuing travel advisories for U.S., can you really blame them? I would rather blame somebody if they were to pay their own money, apply for visas, come here, let's say, to cheer on the athletes during the Olympics, and then they got detained by ICE and deported somewhere, right, into the third country or whatever. I would rather blame them, in that case, saying, hey, you actually knew where you're going, right? And it was very interesting. My parents are in town. We went for, museums, and I recorded some content for Sunday edition, and thank you so much for reading Sunday edition. I think this will be our bright light, going forward. So essentially we walked all around New York, and it was very interesting to see it on Friday night, Saturday night. Restaurants were empty. I understand that New Yorkers who can afford it go to the Hamptons and whatnot over the weekend, but not as much. And we also haven't seen many tourists. So usually you have a lot of folks from Asia, you have a lot of folks from European Union, you hear different languages. All of that is not really consistent with what it has been in previous years. City is quite empty. And this is very interesting. It just reminds me on COVID years. And yeah, there streets were literally empty and everything was closed, but now everything is open with little to no people in areas that had crowds, right? Interesting. So next is Ukraine, and here's what happened before, and then I'm going to add the White House remarks, well, what Trump added today after he delivered his news about Washington, D.C., which sort of adds more hateful rhetoric to the meeting that he will be having with Putin and hatred towards Zelensky. So, Ukraine and its European allies are intensifying calls for Kyiv inclusion in upcoming peace talks ahead of high-stakes US-Russia summit between President Trump and President Putin, which will happen on Friday in Alaska. Let's state the obvious. We, American people, are welcoming a murderous dictator who is currently killing civilians, stealing children, raping women, children, and men. We're welcoming him on our soil. Moreover, we're welcoming him to the part of United States that previously belonged to Russia, which obviously opened the gates to Russian state propaganda media to start talking about, is Putin returning, to his own land? Will this be part of the deal? And so this narrative started that, well, maybe Alaska will just go to Russia as part of the Ukrainian settlement and whatnot. I say bogus, but I will tell you what I think and what I hear once I'm done with this, stating the facts, because I don't want to mix them. So over the weekend, the G7 leaders, right? UK, Canada, Italy, and all G7, aside from US, they issued a statement. It wasn't too strong. It wasn't too weak. It was diplomatic for those who kind of cherish diplomacy. They said, look, essentially, we need Ukraine at the table if you decide on Ukraine's future, right? Ukraine has to decide on its borders. Ukraine is a sovereign country that has been invaded by Russia. We welcome all type of diplomatic efforts, but those have to be diplomatic efforts. Don't make a deal with murderous Putin, speaking on behalf of Ukraine, speaking on behalf and deciding, most importantly, on behalf of European Union, because this is part of our land and we kind of have to belong, right? So this is what European Union leaders did. Kyiv said the same thing. Zelensky said, look, I got to be at that meeting, right? Meanwhile, Vice President Vance is visiting England, and he's giving he's giving interviews in England. He was in Kent. He met with the defense minister of the UK. He also is visiting, I think, on the 13th, so Wednesday, he's visiting US troops stationed in the UK. But essentially, in that interview, Vance is saying that, or is seen saying that, we're sick of supporting Ukraine and Ukraine's ambitions and illusions, and essentially they have to make a deal, and the deal will be as such as it will be making both sides, Ukraine and Russia, equally upset. Whatever. Habladi hablada means nothing. So the meeting on Friday, which was announced by Trump last week, will mark Putin's first visit to the United States in a decade. Trump has floated the idea that peace deal could involve swapping territories, a suggestion that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has firmly rejected. Zelensky stressed that while Ukraine seeks a lasting peace, it will not cede any sovereign land, a position supported by European leaders from Finland, France, and the UK, who insist that a ceasefire must precede any meaningful negotiations. They have also urged Trump to pressure Putin through tougher sanctions. Now, as to Vance, he revealed that Washington is working toward potential trilateral meeting involving Zelensky, but said such talks might not be productive before Trump and Putin meet face to face. Vance also noted that any eventual deal will likely leave both Russia and Ukraine unhappy, as I mentioned. NATO's U.S. Ambassador Matthew Whitaker suggested Zelensky's attendance in Alaska remains under discussion. EU foreign ministers are meeting today to coordinate positions ahead of the summit. Now, Trump today at the White House confirmed that Zelensky is not invited to the meeting on Friday. He said, well, I'll read it out. This is disgusting. So, speaking at the White House press conference, which was about the DC issue, but actually then included, of course, questions. And then one question was about his meeting with Putin. He says, Trump, that he's upset with Zelensky because Ukrainian leader needs congressional approval for land swap. And he added that, well, he didn't need any approval to go to war and kill everybody. Excuse you? First of all, Zelensky is referring to, as I mentioned here, to Ukrainian constitution that describes the borders very clearly. Since 1991, Ukraine is a sovereign country with clearly defined borders. Second, Ukraine did not start war. Zelensky did not need permission to kill everyone. Who started the war was Putin by bombing Ukrainian cities on February 23rd. In Ukraine, there was still February 22nd, 3 years ago. So what are you talking about? So, Trump said he intends to hear what Putin has in mind. Well, we all know what Putin has in mind. He wants to rebuild Soviet Union. He wants to not just own Ukraine. He wants to own the Baltic states, Moldova. Belarus is already, sort of his-ish. So, but he says, well, I want to hear what Putin has in mind. And if the proposal seems fair for whom? For you? He will push for it, promising to call Zelensky first out of respect and then call European leaders. Then he started talking about Russia owning the prime waterfront property that they will not be giving away. And because he's a real estate guy, Trump is, he says he understands that this is so valuable. You will never give this up because you conquered it fairly, blah, blah, blah. He's referring to Crimea that was taken over by Russia without a single shot fired, because they created this, first of all, a propaganda machine that led to this referendum where people voted with completely brainwashed idea of what will follow. Folks got Russian passports, then Russians came in, bought out the property, kicked out people who used to live there and whatnot. So they did occupy the area. International community is not recognizing Crimea as Russian because it is seen and declared that this was a fake, a fake voting procedure, a referendum that, resulted into this, again, fake outcomes. So, when asked about inviting Zelensky to join Alaska summit with Putin, Trump replied, quote, "Why would you invite someone who has been doing it for 3 years with no deals made?" Because Ukraine is on the end of, on the receiving end, receiving murderous invaders trying to defend themselves. So, altogether, what do I think, if you ask me? I think that the meeting between Trump and Putin has nothing to do with Ukraine. It is, again, labeled and advertised as the big meeting discussing the end of the war between Russia and Ukraine. This is the PR thing. I think, and that is what I hear as well, and I honestly, I do agree with that. But again, take it with a grain of salt. We're going to see what's real on Friday. But what I do think that this is a meeting between Trump and Putin with no transcript provided that will be, of course, resembling the meeting in Helsinki, but where the press conference and the public part will go about Ukraine, and Trump will say, well, I heard Putin's point, and he taught me history again, and I kind of understand that Ukraine is historically Russian, and habladi hablada, this, right? And essentially, he will say, Ukrainian leader Zelensky has to do the land swap, he has to recognize the occupied areas as Russian, and then Zelensky will say, hell no, and then Trump will blame Zelensky and say, look, I did everything I could. Zelensky failed to deliver here, and so we will not be aiding Ukraine. And then he will say, European Union has to aid Ukraine. But then what is this aid? This aid is European Union buying from United States the military equipment. So US can delay production, can withhold production, can deny sales and whatnot. So essentially altogether aiding Russia. This is the PR part. Now, in real terms, Trump and Putin will seek some type of deal. Putin wants to control the part of Arctic that is outside of his control. This has all to do with the trade. It has all to do with military access, right? And national security for Russia. If you look at the map, with having North Pole in the middle and you see the countries around, this infamous map, right? This will explain to you why it would make sense for US, right, to have access to Canadian side of the Arctic and have Greenland there as well. And if Putin would close a deal with US that has access to Canadian North and Greenland, then Putin will have everything outside the European Union piece, which puts European Union, meaning Finland, Sweden, in very interesting position because they would be caught in this axis of evil, right? The US and Russia, right? And so I think if Trump is falling for the okie doke of having Trump Tower in Moscow or some beachfront or waterfront property somewhere in Russia or whatnot, he will close deals with Putin having access or some type of cooperation with United States on securing the Arctic. Now, all of this will fail if Canada will speak out against it, will not be part of the Golden Dome, because the Golden Dome will give access to United States, to Canadian North. For that reason, you need a very clear definition of what is ours by Canada and what we will be part of and what we will not be part of. Now, this definition doesn't have to come in the way of a public statement, but it has to be delivered from Carney to Trump, to the point where we're going to defend us if you will try. Because if Russia and US will start cooperating, let's say when it comes to Alaska, when it comes to the North, when it comes to the international sea waters, right? Think about North Pole area. This will put European Union in a very tragic situation. It will put Canada in a weird situation, but also NATO in a weird situation, to the point where over the last 3 years, I have been emailing nonstop, NATO nonstop, under the previous Secretary General Stoltenberg to the current one, Rutte. I asked Stoltenberg in person. I asked Rutte in person in the press, conference scenarios, and I got no answer. Actually, I got blamed for, inciting some type of nervousness and anxiety. My question was, what will NATO do if a NATO member attacks other NATO members or puts their national security in jeopardy or puts their national security in question? Is there anything written in NATO statute or law that will essentially highlight the next steps to follow if that happens? Because think about European Union and Brexit, when it was nothing put in stone as to how European Union member can exit. There is an entry clause and steps to complete to enter European Union, but there was nothing on how you exit. And the same thing is now with NATO, right? Go back with European Union when Brexit happened. It was a complete, excuse me, shit show. NATO is a defense alliance. So if one country, an ally, let's say US, puts other members, Canada, Denmark, because Greenland, right, is protected by Denmark, their national security in question and under threat, what will NATO do? Will other members be ready and able and allowed to defend those they aligned with or not? I do believe the meeting between Putin and Trump has little to do with Ukraine, has a lot to do with Arctic, has a lot to do with deals that probably we will find out about once Trump leaves Oval Office, if he does. Unless the next person is JD Vance or somebody alike who will keep the narrative. But what really happened there will be exposed once a Democratic leader is in office and will then deal with going back on this. This is my humble opinion. This is what I envision in this. But altogether, this will not resolve the war in Ukraine just by definition that Trump, or for the reason that Trump has not understood or has not taken time or maybe lacks the ability to understand the real issue and what is the issue between Russia and Ukraine, and Russia occupying a sovereign state of Ukraine, and Putin's stories and fairy tales about the Ruriks and Russia owning Ukraine and Ukraine being Russian and Molo Russia, which is like little Russia before, and all that type of stuff. He fails to understand, for one reason or another, that Ukraine does not belong to Russia, that it has not been Russian. It has been part of Soviet Union, but so were other countries. And he does not understand that Putin's idea is to use him as a useful tool to allow him to expand his aggression, expand his occupation. Nothing will be solved on Ukraine. Zelensky will be blamed. If anything, last resort, if Trump really pushes Putin to sit down with Zelensky, watch it. Putin will say, I'm not going to sit down with Zelensky because he's a legitimate president. He overstayed his welcome because the elections in Ukraine, presidential elections, have been postponed and canceled because of the war. So I'm not going to sit down with him. He's illegitimate. He's not even president at this point. So his signature will have absolutely no worth. So why am I going to even sit with him? Putin will not be sitting down with Zelensky. Neither he will be sitting down with Trump and Zelensky. He will not be legitimizing Zelensky. He will not be seeing him as the leader of a sovereign country because he doesn't see Ukraine as a sovereign country. He sees Ukraine as his own misbehaving, that is having illusions, that is, acting irrationally and not submitting. And Trump, for one reason or another, does not understand it, or he's using the situation to gain. Now, my question is, what is the deal? What does Trump want to get from Putin? What will he get from Putin? Because something's got to give. So we'll see what will happen on Friday, and I certainly will report everything I hear. Now, let's talk a bit about national news. In Milwaukee, they declared state of emergency on Saturday after flash floods dumped 5.74 inches of rain in just a few hours, causing major disruptions. The Wisconsin State Fair was forced to close a day and a half early, and dozens of people had to be rescued from vehicles, according to city's fire chief. Now, widespread power outages and property damage have been reported. Over 10 million people are now under state of emergency. So if you're there, please listen to the advisory. And also, if you lack this type of information, same as what we saw in Texas, please use federal resources, National Weather Service and whatnot. Now, the National Weather Service has since warned of continued heavy rainfall across Midwest, Central Plains, and Southwest throughout today. So, other news, the legal battle, right, over Trump's deployment of 4,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles in response to those protests, right, against ICE raids, it heads to court today. So, California Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass opposed the move, arguing it violated the 147-year-old law governing when the president can federalize the guard. Newsom's attorney claimed Trump overstepped his authority, while Trump's lawyers argued the troops were sent to solely protect federal property, not to engage in law enforcement. So, this is going to court today. We will see what will result out of it. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for sharing the live stream. I appreciate you. Michael says, I thought that was what NATO was for originally, exactly to protect allies. That's what I thought too. Good morning, Brandon. Good morning. Hope you're staying safe. What Trump is doing in DC, so stupid. Crime is 30-year low. Exactly. It is stupid, but unless it is facing opposition legally, lawsuits and whatnot that will postpone this or cancel it out, it can roll out to other cities. So essentially, we are up for some turbulence at least. So in some quick news, Trump says that Qatari jet that was gifted to him to be used as Air Force One will be ready in 6 months, but the experts are skeptical. Trump remains optimistic despite those skepticism from experts about the timeline. But again, it will cost what, about $1 billion. This is an old jet that they sold to him during his first presidency. They wanted to sell him two, ended up selling one. This jet was rotting and just standing there, or was parked for years, was not even utilized in any type of way, and Trump paid for it during first presidency. I reported on that earlier, so it's not really a gift. Now, Katie Miller is launching podcast for conservative mothers, and her first guest will be J.D. Vance. Oy, oy. Okay, 120 FBI agents to be temporarily reassigned to nighttime patrols in Washington, part of Trump's effort to crack down on street crime in the Capitol. So they are hiring more FBI agents, which I guess will just be same as ICE agents, right? Probably masks, probably unidentified. So, it's just different label. Okay, RK Jr. proposes easing vaccine injury claims process, and this is crazy. Experts worry this could lead to more lawsuits and reduced access to vaccines. So essentially, people will be able to file lawsuits against the vaccine. They took the vaccine and they can blame it for other health issues that they gotten from it. So if this results in class action suits, this will, be a major deal. And who knows if those claims are legitimate to begin with. So immigrant aid groups, undocumented flood victims in Texas fear deportation. So to the point where some undocumented individuals may avoid seeking assistance due to deportation concerns. And for that reason, for instance, I personally know people who are so scared, and even though they're here legally, right, with green cards and long stay permits, they're so afraid to come up in the system in one way or another that they even are avoiding food stamps and going to doctor's appointments because they're just scared for their name to come up in the system. Crazy. Now, they're not crazy. The system is weird and wild. AOL is discontinuing dial-up internet service. I didn't know this still existed, but it's departing. AOL ends its iconic service, marking the end of an era for early internet access. You know this, the noises? Yeah, we all been there. Now to global news, and this is some extended coverage to Israel because what happened over the weekend needs proper reporting on it because it's been a lot, and we're not talking about it because today is again DC situation. Don't talk about Israel, don't talk about Epstein, don't talk about anything. Talk about what Trump tells you to talk about. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced an expansion of military operations in Gaza, stating that the strikes will now target central camps. And the camps are in Muwazi area. So locations, the UN says that shelter of 500,000 people. Those are displaced people. And this is in addition to Gaza City. He claimed the broader offensive is needed to finish the job. Finish the job is what? Prepare it for Trump Gaza? Meanwhile, an Israeli airstrike near Al Shifa hospital killed 5 Al Jazeera journalists, including reporters Anas Al Sharif and Mohammed Krikway. The journalists were in a tent marked as press near the hospital's main gate when the strike occurred. The IDF stated it was targeting Al Sharif, one of the journalists, labeling him as Hamas militia person, or the one who will be protecting Hamas and is part of Hamas force, so to speak. An accusation both Al Sharif and Al Jazeera have denied. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 186 journalists have been killed since the war began nearly 2 years ago, with at least 178 of them being Palestinians killed by Israel. Just minutes before his death, the journalist that they've been targeting, the journalist Al Sharif, posted on social media, quote, "If this madness does not end, Gaza will be reduced to ruins, its people's voices silenced, their faces erased, and history will remember you as silent witnesses to a genocide you chose not to stop," end quote. This applies to Ukraine, by the way, as well. So, fake coverage, non-coverage, lack of coverage leads to misinformation, disinformation, filling the vacuum, the informational vacuum. And so, as I mentioned last time, I do wholeheartedly believe that you can be both pro-Israel and pro-Palestine. You can be for a two-state solution. If you don't see anything wrong with innocent Israelis being targeted and killed on October 7th, something is wrong with you. As much as if you don't feel anything, seeing 30,000 children in Gaza being killed, and altogether over 60,000 people killed after October 7th, then there's something is wrong with you. And yes, we can talk about how many were killed on the 7th and stolen, and then killed as hostages or still held as hostages versus how many were killed in Palestine. But I think it is a wrong discussion to have. We need to restore order as much as in Palestine, as much as in Israel, because Netanyahu is using his own country to prolong his stay in power. Although he's being investigated, he's changing Department of Justice leadership just to not to be investigated and to stay longer in power, which is not in interest of Israelis either. So, but with United States sponsoring Israel, Israel's army, right? We're supplying Israel with anything they want, pretty much, right? Yes, under Biden administration, U.S. were put a ban on supplying this B-2 bombers, right? The heavy bombers. With Trump, under Trump, we used them. We even used them to bomb the facilities in Iran. So in this case, U.S. playing a big role and Trump willing to build this Trump Gaza. I do not believe that whatever he puts on Truth Social is just for kicks and giggles. I think it is planting a thought, planting a visual. There was this golden Trump statue. He talks continuously about prime waterfront property, referring to Crimea, but also referring to Gaza as well. So this is part of a big plan, and we have to see it as such. So, as to declaring Palestine a state and seeing it as a state, Australia has joined now countries like Canada, France, and the UK, announcing that they will officially recognize Palestinian state at the next month UN General Assembly after Palestinian Authority commits to demilitarize Gaza and hold elections. So, again, what I mentioned earlier is I do see this as a feasible plan. Of course, Palestinians have to stand up to Hamas and express at least the willingness to stand up to Hamas in order for international communities to help them. If international community would come in as is to eliminate Hamas and take charge, it would be a takeover, which is prohibited under international law. So for that reason, they can defend one party. But if that party is aligning with Hamas, they cannot do that. So again, we're not guesstimating that all Palestinians are Hamas, nor are we saying that Hamas plays no role in Palestine. So for that reason, it is a conscious approach. So let's see what this discussions lead to. Now, I said I reported on it last Friday where I was kicked out of the stream by several platforms. Let's try it again. So last Friday, Trump signed a proclamation in secrecy where he allowed for Pentagon to step on Mexican soil, to use drones and troops to fight drug cartels. So, in this case, now Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum ruled out any U.S. military action on Mexican soil after reports that President Trump secretly directed Pentagon operations against drug cartels came out. A White House spokesperson clarified that Trump's priority is protecting the homeland, but did not confirm any new military actions. Now, White House press secretary is Carolyn Levitt. I don't think this is factual information to go by. So Mexico clearly stated, we thought we were over the hump. We thought we sort of managed to contain Trump's willingness to step into Mexico, but now here we are again to square zero. So again, let's see what this will lead to. In India, Indian authorities have detained large number of Muslims and Bengali speakers following an April terrorist attack in Kashmir. Rights groups have condemned the raids as arbitrary, with most of the detained individuals living far from Pakistan, which India blamed for the attack. Thousands have been expelled to Bangladesh, including some Indian citizens who were later readmitted. And see, here's the point. United States is, right, the world's biggest democracy, or has been, right? And we set trends. We set trends in politics, policies, in movies. We set trends in clothes. We set trends in food, in, anything that we consume, essentially, right? Look at social media and the TikTok dances. We set trends. And we set trends to this mass. Because whatever you just heard about India doing to Bengali speakers and Muslims, it's the same story that we're doing here against Mexicans and everyone, essentially, who's not blonde and blue-eyed. We're setting trends. And if this is not condemned, if this is not just condemned with strong worded letters, but fought in court against, this will expand to other countries. This will give ideas and worse, permissions to other authoritarian leaders and wannabes to follow into the footsteps. Now, as to South Korea's armed forces have decreased by 20% over the past 6 years, in large due to declining birth rates. The ruling party lawmaker reported this, and the country is short 50,000 troops for adequate military readiness, which compulsory military service for men, and a growing concern about defense capabilities. Certainly not a good move, given North Korea's continuous threat and also potential escalation in the Indo-Pacific. Now, in Sudan, cholera, how do you pronounce it? I pronounce everything German way, so anyway, those causes have spreading across Sudan's Darfur region and Chad refugee settlement near the border. The UN Refugee Agency reported over 4,300 cases were reported in Darfur and 264 in the Chad settlement. So essentially, they're asking for $130 million from United States to help combat the issue. Cholera? Let me look it up. Apologies. Now, and I mentioned too that I will sort of paint the picture of what to expect this week, nationally and globally. So today, Intel CEO Lip-Bu Tan, remember whom Trump blamed last week and said, you did not donate to my campaign, you're not giving me percentages of your deals, I want to, be part of everything you do, and he's calling for his resignation. So he's visiting the White House today to see if he can make a deal. And same as what we saw with Nippon Steel and Japan, where Trump got percentage from that deal. Well, it says federal government gets percentage from that deal. The same story also manifested itself in the chip deals, right, that were closed last week. So essentially, Trump currently adopted this measure as to allow business dealings to continue and be approved if he gets percentage from the deal. Now, also, UN Security Council holds a meeting today on international maritime security. Also, Vietnamese leader To Lam is in South Korea for a state visit today. South Korea and Vietnam are aiming to close trade deals and also defense cooperation. On Tuesday, tomorrow, is the deadline for US and China to extend their tariff truce and pause. So we'll see what this will manifest in, and if anything will be resulting out of it, or US will be ending with, imposing 145% tariffs on Chinese imports, which will certainly affect everyone. And now, given the end of the year, holiday season, and whatnot. Now, the July Consumer Price Index will be released on Tuesday, tomorrow, providing Wall Street and Jerome Powell insight into potential tariff-related price increases. Now, prices rose 0.3% in June, with several consumer goods reflecting the impact of tariffs. There's also anticipation surrounding President Trump's reaction to new data from Bureau of Labor Statistics following his dismissal of the agency's head after the last jobs report. So essentially, they will be presenting some new facts and whatever data that will be favored by the White House tomorrow, and again, blaming Powell for not reducing the rates. Now, also, fresh retail sales data will be released on Friday, which will certainly paint the picture as to the plans for companies and industries as a whole, as to what to plan with when it comes to holiday season and end of the year. So purchasing power is playing a role here. Brandon says Gaza is not anyone's to own. They have right to be their own country, right? Yeah. That's the two-state solution, right? Michael says Trump doesn't know how to work with anybody, country, or leader, right? This is sort of the art of the deal. I was stupid enough to read it. I know Trump had nothing with writing this book, but there it was that the win-win scenario is outdated. You always have to win, and the other party always has to lose. And so this certainly directs his approach with anything, but has nothing to do with diplomacy. Brad says if they invade because of drugs, this means they can invade Canada for their fentanyl, Afghanistan for poppy, Somalia for bat, and Peru because of their ayahuasca. Yeah, look. At this point, we make up data about Washington, D.C. You know? How easy it is to tell uneducated Americans about whatever happens anywhere and seek their approval for invasion and for using their sons and daughters for such invasion. It's way easier than making up data about D.C. that is available, that is published on the DOJ's website, that has been widely reported on from January on. As soon as let me read it, because I do have it, because I'm going to put it in the newsletter. So, yeah, here. Violent crime in D.C. hits 30-year low. This was released on January 3rd, 2025. Total violent crime for 2024 in District of Columbia is down 35% from 2023 and is the lowest it has been in over 30 years, according to data collected by Metropolitan Police Department and announced by United States Attorney Matthew Graves. A breakdown of the data is available here. It is on their goddamn website. And then on January 5th, it said that the crime data is the lowest here. It went down by 26% that year alone. So if we're making up stuff about DC, it's very easy to make up stuff about Ukraine and Somalia and, and of course, Canada and Mexico and Greenland and everybody. and portray Russia as a great, country. And Trump was speaking today about 11 time zones in Russia, and Russia is so big and it's so, bombastic and could do so well. But now it's, you know, the war with Ukraine is affecting Russian economy. So let's just, you know, stop the war to help Russians. But he doesn't understand the whole idea. The economy in Russia and their approach is completely restructured to feed the war machine. They are prepared to invade further. They will not be stopping in Ukraine and with whatever they have occupied. They're not interested in land swaps. What they can be interested is pause. And they specifically are saying we're seeking ceasefire when it comes to aerial attacks. Why? Because in best case scenario, this is protecting Ukrainian civilians because they're suffering from Russian attacks every night, right? Every early mornings. But it will give Russia protection because what Ukraine does in return is literally attacking and taking out of the game those oil, um, you know, facilities inside Russia that are financing this war. So of course it is in the Russian interest to stop aerial attacks and to stop those drones from flying on their territory and attacking their facilities. Yeah, civilians will not be affected, but for that reason, Russia will be able to rebuild, get more support from China, Iran, North Korea, get more soldiers, right? And invade further. And we see how they're affecting Moldova and Belarus and whatnot. Today, the Belarusian leader Lukashenko said that what Trump has to account for that meeting on Friday is for Putin to tell him to f himself, and he literally said that because Putin hasn't said it yet, but he can say it any moment, and Trump just has to live with it. And Trump will try not to get there. For that, he will need to offer something. I do not think he's offering Alaska because he's going to be eaten alive, but cooperation, Arctic, and whatnot. So for that reason, where's NATO? Where are those alliances? Also, Canada closed the deal, is also now part of the Safe Pact with EU, which connects now Canada and Greenland, and that cooperation, of course, with Finland and Sweden. Will they have a say in this type of deal? Because the international community is not recognizing land swaps in Ukraine, Arctic collaboration, security-wise between Russia and United States, it will lead again to disagreements. Can we solve it? Right? And European leaders are trying to maintain some type of warm relationship with Trump by kissing his behind, so he doesn't openly state that I'm with Russia and I'm aiding Putin. So he's sort of caught in this limbo, at least. Again, let's see what this will manifest in. Let's see if we will actually get what really went down in that meeting on Friday. I'll do my best to report on it. I don't want to overstay my welcome longer than I already did. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow for another recap. And the newsletter is coming very shortly with the latest news. So if you haven't subscribed yet, it's right here, honestnetwork.com or nestnetwork.com. Monday through Friday, you get short newsletters on global news and national news. And on Saturday, we have a deep dive and summary of the week. If you haven't caught up on the last week's, it's on the site. It's available, so take a look. And then Sunday, we have no politics edition. It's a Sunday edition. It's about culture, arts, and everything that keeps us alive and upbeat. Okay? All right. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for commenting. Everyone who commented, everyone who pressed like, everyone who followed and subscribed. Thank you so much. And I really encourage you to do so. It doesn't cost anything. We are a nonprofit. So if you decide to support us, you go to our website and donate whatever you feel is right. It's up to you, but we do not rely on any corporate, fundings or whatnot. So for that reason, I'm able to say what I say and report the way I envision it and, to say the truth. So thank you so much, C-Twist Production. Thank you so much for commenting. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Brandon, and everybody who commented, and Michael and Brett, and who was there, Bill, for sharing, and Okay, Tidy Whitey and Courtney Crush and Steven, thank you so much for commenting. I appreciate you, and I will see you tomorrow. Stay safe, keep your head on a swivel, and we'll get there. It's a marathon, so take care of you first. Okay, see you tomorrow.